Did you see the stylish kids in the room?
Welcome to the Young IPA podcast. I'm James. This is not Pete. This is Adam. We probably should have talked about this on last week's show, but we didn't. But anyway, Pete is not going to be here for the next 2 weeks. He is over in the UK helping Australia win the Ashes by probably getting drunk in a stadium. So have fun, Pete. Hope you miss us. We're definitely going to miss you. But Adam, welcome to the show.
G'day. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I'm the new Pete.
Yeah, so last week went really well, so we thought, hey, let's get Adam in, sit in on Pete. So first off, the nation wants to know, how did the gig on Friday night go?
It went quite well, you
Yeah?
know. Good crowd. Thanks for all those that came. I don't know if you guys are listening. I don't know how much of an overlap
They
there is.
definitely are.
Yeah, I saw you all there.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, but they couldn't get them all in. All right. So, yeah, we got a huge show for you guys coming up. We're going to be talking about all the things that are happening with big tech in Australia. Going to be talking about metadata as well. We've got a whole bunch of stuff here. Heroes and villains, as always. We've got an interview with Matthew Lesh. He's an adjunct fellow at the IPA. He's been on the show a few times. He's now the head of research at the Adam Smith Institute. Going to be talking about Boris. Going to be talking about Brexit. I've got all these questions, so we discussed them with Matthew, so that's going to be a lot of fun. And then another interview, which I'm really looking forward to, is with Shawn. He is in Australia. He's a native Hong Konger, so we're going to be talking to him about what it's like living in Hong Kong through a very tumultuous time, prospects for liberty, etc. But we should probably get into the big story this week, which is big tech finally looking like they're about to get regulated. So the ACCC have come out with a report. ACCC, whenever I hear that in a sentence, I immediately get a bit drowsy because it doesn't sound like it's going to be the most interesting thing.
It's a long name.
It's a long name. So the ACCC, they've described technology giants Facebook and Google as publishers rather than like platforms. Now, the important thing with that is that they then would get regulated as though they were a publisher. So the thing is now the government has a bit more grounds to start regulating them, start getting in control of certain actions that Facebook and Google have, which is pretty concerning. And then the opposition, Labor, they've got onto the front foot with this one. So communications spokeswoman Michelle Rowland has said she doesn't trust tech giants Google and Facebook to crack down on fake news without new regulatory intervention. So this might end up with Google and Facebook being held responsible for any fake news that get published on Google or Facebook. Pretty scary stuff.
Yeah, completely scary. I guess at the end of the day, the question is, why is the government the people that we're going to regulate fake news? Why is it up to them?
Yeah, exactly. Because, I don't know. If I'm the government and I don't want certain news stories out there, and I know if I call them fake news, they don't get out there, that seems like a pretty powerful thing that I can do. So that's pretty scary. We'll be following that one a bit closer, but yeah, I like the idea that the government can just go, that's fake news. This thing that we're wasting all this money, fake news. So I think don't have it anymore.
My problem with it as well, I think what everyone loves about social media is it's given a voice to everyone. You don't need to be an author. It's taken away that screening process that other media platforms have, like the newspaper and stuff. So it kind of feels like they're taking away that ability for anyone and everyone to be able to say what they like.
Yeah, exactly. Because, all the things that you want to say on Facebook now, you might not be able to because Facebook are going to worry about, does this fall under the regulations that have now been put on it? So going to be interesting stuff. Now, the free market solution is, as always, if you're not happy, because there's also this movement within conservatism where it's like, our voices are getting shut down by Facebook and Google. The government needs to step in. I know PragerU sued Google and they're talking to the government about it. Surely the idea is that you just go to a different social media website, set up your own, and make that one the one rather than relying on the government to get involved. So we'll be following that one a lot closer. It's going to be interesting to see how that pans out. But yeah, that's the story. So Adam, let's also talk the metadata stuff, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, metadata. Well, so the ACT police have just admitted that they unlawfully accessed people's metadata more than 3,000 times.
After previously saying it was 116. And they've gone up
it's a big
to
step up.
3,000.
And this is only in 4 years, keep in mind.
Yeah.
So a bit of a background on metadata, if anyone wants to know. Metadata is kind of like information about other data that telcos are now required to keep on you. So it's things like what email addresses you're using, when and where you call and use your phone. So it's pretty invasive stuff. They know a lot about what you're doing, and it's meant to be used for national security.
Yeah.
But
yeah, exactly. Well, that's another thing that we found out because a parliamentary inquiry, this came out today, a parliamentary inquiry has been told that 87 agencies, at least, including veterinary bodies, councils and fisheries agencies, have warrantless access to metadata held by telco. So it's not just ACT police accessing it that you need to worry about.
It's the fisheries.
It's now the fisheries. Like literally the Veterinary Surgeons Board of WA, Victorian Fisheries, Liverpool City Council and ASADA of asking for people's metadata. Now, I don't know what Victorian Fisheries do from 9 to 5:30, but I'm pretty sure that whatever they do, they don't need my metadata to be able to do it.
Yep, I agree. And they're booking people for things like, illegally removing trees, illegally dumping rubbish, using this metadata. And I'm struggling to see the link between that and national security.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And we were talking off air how with like Facebook and Google, everyone worries about like, Facebook and Google, they know so much about you. And, you type in a Google Maps address and immediately suggest a place you went 2.5 years ago. You're like, how do you know that? The thing with Facebook and Google is you can deactivate Facebook and Google.
Yeah, you can leave it at any time.
I can't deactivate the government from my phone or
Well,
Victorian fisheries.
The only thing you can do is build a bunker and hide in the forest.
And is that a life? Is that a life we want to lead? You're a rock star. You can't be doing the whole
it'd be
secluded person in the woods.
Yeah, it'd be peaceful, but maybe a little empty.
Yeah. You don't get the fan interaction. That
No,
desperately
certainly not.
All right, sweet. So I got one more story. So this one breaking this morning. So literally we heard about it an hour before we went into the studio. So the Conservative Political Action Conference going down in Sydney next week. It's like this big conference. Get tickets now. I think we're sponsoring part of it. Anyway, so Raheem Kassan is going to speak at this. Now, Raheem Kassan is the former chief advisor to Nigel Farage. He's a former Breitbart editor-in-chief. Big guy. And Labor are now trying to get his visa stopped to stop him speaking at this conference. So Christina Keneally said the government should revoke Mr. Kassam's visa for comments he made about women and Islam. Now, I read the comments, not exactly comments that I would be making on my own social media services.
They're
interesting. But the point is, like, this guy is a pretty big fish. People definitely want to hear about him. And if you're going to ban a guy's visa from coming into the country, the excuses better be good. And Christina Keneally's literal excuse, word for word, is we should not allow career bigots, a person who spreads hate speech, to enter our country with the express intent of undermining equality. I'm sorry, undermining equality is not a good enough excuse to ban someone from the country.
No, and I think and I'm always trying to explain this to some of my friends, if someone's got such a ridiculous point of view and you completely disagree with it, then just let them say it and then just prove why they're wrong. Just debate them. It should be really easy.
Like if Christina Keneally really doesn't want this guy speaking or doesn't want people listening to this guy freely, invite him to a debate and then expose him.
Tell everyone why he's wrong. And if you're so right, it should be really easy to do that.
Exactly, because the inverse of doing that, which is what she's doing, where you try to get it banned, creates all this publicity. I did not know who this guy was until this morning, and now I'm just like, oh, okay, right. Well, people would want to hear from that guy. So really, Christina Keneally has done some bang-up PR job for the CPAC conference. Like, she's really getting the name out there. The other one I want to say is, like, do you reckon Christina Keneally knows about Skype?
No, she is no other way of communicating with people.
If you don't let him into the country, he will still speak at the conference.
Exactly. Like we already know about him. Social media is real.
Yeah, exactly.
We can hear from him anywhere. It's pretty easy.
And you probably have his metadata as well. All right. So those are the three main stories. We'll get into heroes and villains segments. So the hero of the week, our favorite, Grunt the Pig Freedom Award. Play the damn tape. Grunt the Pig Freedom Award this week. So what it is basically people that have stood up for freedom. Now, Grunt the Pig, that is the snort of freedom that we heard. So Grunt the Pig, who's going to win the award this week? So my nominee is Alan Gardocki. So Alan Gardocki is an artist in Victoria. He submitted a bust to the Victorian Sculptors Association's annual exhibition, which is like this big corporate thing. And he got it rejected on the grounds of nudity and being too political in nature. Now, before you ask what it was, it was literally just a sculpture of a man's torso from about the chest up, and it's a bare chest. Like this is the modern. This is the latest nipplegate. You can't have the male nipple being shown in a corporate event, and this is bad news for the Renaissance.
It is. We've taken a lot of steps back, and that's a lot of artwork we're going to have to go put away.
Yeah. The statue of David, I'm sorry, that's going to have to come down, or at least
can't go
put a singlet on, or a t-shirt, or maybe just a nice apron.
Yeah, we could dress it up like
exactly. Or there's a lot of paintings of Jesus that I'm now that definitely can't be shown in public. We can't have that sort of nudity going astray. So bad news. But Alan is going to be fighting the good fight. He's making up a big stink about this. So for that reason, Adam is this week's Hero of the Week for me.
All right. Well, my one, it's a kid. He remains nameless. I don't know his name. But there's a video of him.
There's a difference between remaining nameless and not knowing his name. But no, I'm sorry.
Is there? Either way, he doesn't have a name. Anyway, there's a video of him playing Monopoly and he's crying. And he says in the video, it's not fun because he has to pay taxes.
Yeah. Let's play the video now.
Oh my gosh.
Where's all your money gone, Donnie?
Taxes. 6, 9, 10, 11. Let me fix my houses.
Bug, it's okay. It's part of the game.
No, it's not.
It is.
Fun.
It's not fun to what?
It's the worst part of the game.
Is what?
Taxes.
Welcome to the club, kid.
Yeah, exactly.
And I guess I feel bad for him because, most people don't really, they don't realize the terrible taxes until they get a bit older. But he's completely missed out on the blissful ignorance of being a child.
Yeah, exactly. Or it being in the mid-20s, because you have that stage in the early 20s where every time you hand in a tax return, it's just getting money back.
Yeah, it's
and then
just
eventually
like they're saving for you.
Yeah. And then I've just got to the point recently where it's like you hand it in and they're like, oh no, we're keeping this.
Oh, wait, yeah.
Like, wait, what? That's not how it used to work at all. You used to give it back to me.
What's funny is, I guess, I think Monopoly was made so, to tell us how bad capitalism is.
Yeah.
Everyone loves it so much. All it's really showed is we all really like it. We just don't like paying the taxes part.
Yeah, exactly. Like the worst part of Monopoly for me is the people that enforce the rule about free parking. Like all the fines get paid in the middle, and if you land on free parking, you get the fines, which is the only part of the game which is actually socialist. And like that's the part that gets people's goat. So I don't think it is the anti-capitalist machine that people think it is.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I reckon that kid, I don't know how we're going to track him down to a water, but definitely for me, that kid that you've nominated gets the Hero of the Week.
I'm going to give it to him.
We'll give him the Grunt the Pig Freedom Snout. Okay, and that would also bring us to Villains of the Week. So this is the Howard Peck Award, named after one of the great villains in film history from Ghostbusters. So this is basically people, like, the inverse of the Freedom Award. People that have stood up for tyranny, people that have crushed spirits and innovation. So I've got one here. So Berkeley Council, it's in California, in America. They are removing the words manhole and manpower from official lexicon. Now, there's always been the joke of and it's not a very good joke, but when someone sees the word man in a word like Manchester or, fireman and stuff like that, they go, you can't say that anymore. Literally, you can't say that anymore. You see, Berkeley has actually run with this and gone, this is a good idea. Sorry. Some of the words, by the way, introduced by Rigel Robinson. First off, amazing name, Rigel. So bondsman is now bond person. Fireman and firewoman will now be both referred to as firefighters. Manpower is now human effort or workforce. Sororities and fraternities are now collegiate Greek system residents. Wow. And pregnant woman will now be referred to as pregnant employee.
Yeah.
What I want to know is in Rigel's immaculate mind, how is this solving any problem? Does he literally send that off and go
if anything, it's kind of just
that's patriarchy
hiding
solved.
the problem,
Yeah.
If there's a problem he thinks he wants to fix, he's kind of just adding a whole lot of stuff on top of it and trying to hide it with silly words.
Yeah, how stupid does Rigel think women are that they'll just go hey, that's an ally. That's a guy standing up for us. That's a guy knowing our true feelings and knowing our true wants.
Recognizing them as part of the human effort.
Yeah, so for that, Rigel, you are villain of the week for me. Now,
Alrighty.
All right, Adam.
Well, I've got a lady named Lord Mayor Clover Moore. So, a bit of background on her. There are a lot of women in Sydney. They're quite concerned about the safety of a park, especially at night. And the suggestion was to install some better lighting. Now, Clover she said she was more concerned about the city's carbon footprint. And she also questioned the complaint because the women don't actually pay to use the park. And therefore, she's not sure whether the lighting's appropriate.
That's bad.
It's quite bad.
Yeah.
It's just an example of climate change ruining people's brains.
Yeah. We always have these things of with climate change, what are you saying is more of an issue. Like we talk about that with coal exports, where it's like, okay, do we want to help people who are desperately poor now, or do we want to fix climate later? And there's always been like, oh, what's more important? I think people like not getting murdered is probably a bit more important.
I think it's up there. And kind of, where does it stop? You know, we're going to just turn off all the traffic lights.
Yeah.
You know, they're contributing. And, you know, are we driving without headlights now?
That was a very Pete moment. You're really transitioning into the Pete role in this podcast
I'm trying
extremely
my best.
well. Like saying, where does it end is a very Pete thing to do. So, Pete, I'd be worried about you, who's definitely not watching this. But
Pete, I'm going to grow a beard.
Gets back to me.
I'm going to try and grow Pete's beard and be Pete.
All right. You're only here for 2 weeks. So if we get to see that beard, there's a bit of stubble. There's a bit of stubble for our people watching on YouTube. All right, we'll see how that goes. All right, I think you're 2 for 2 because that is an outrageous call. Like,
he's pretty mean.
And I also like the idea that, if you want me to care about whether or not you're murdered, you have to pay rates.
Exactly.
Like, I don't hand this out free will.
And because, you know, we don't pay taxes already.
Exactly.
We don't already have money going to these things.
All right, sweet. So you're 2 for 2. That's our hero and villain of the week segment. So we'll now go to our interviews with Matthew, Lesh, and Shawn. Really interesting stuff. So, we'll go to those now. Okay, we're now joined once again by friend of the IPA, adjunct fellow at the IPA, and now head of research at the Adam Smith Institute, Matthew Lesh. Welcome back to the show, Matthew.
Thanks for having me. Great to be back.
Now, so Matthew, you used to be full-time here at the IPA office. You've now moved to the UK. So what is post-IPA life like?
It's just not the same. It's just not the same anymore. I mean, it's basically, as your listeners will know, because of Brexit, it's basically the apocalypse in London. It's the end of the world as we know it, even though Brexit hasn't happened. But no, life is a lot of fun. It's shockingly warm here at the moment, so they're all going crazy, and I'm just feeling like home, so it's quite nice.
Yeah. So what is the Adam Smith Institute for people that might not have come across it yet?
So the ASI is kind of pretty similar to the IPA, not as old. So it was really founded in kind of late 70s, early 80s era. As a real key player when it came to pushing privatizations, both in the UK and right across the world. And the ASI was, and its founders, Eamon and Madsen, really went around the world trying to kind of make the argument for taking public services into private hands. And the ASI has continued the kind of classical liberal libertarian bent ever since. So we do a lot of kind of similar things to the IPA in terms of pushing for free markets, more kind of social liberal freedom on a whole bunch of different issues.
Right, that sounds awesome. We might get back into that in a second, but we better talk about the big issue, which is Boris Johnson. He's now Prime Minister. Things are changing. So where do you sit with Boris? Is he the hero of Brexit, or is it going to be more of the same that we saw under Theresa May?
Look, it's certainly not going to be more of the same of what we saw under Theresa May. I think the entire attitude, the people who've been appointed to cabinet and the disposition of the government is radically changed. I think the biggest moment for me came when it came out that not only in terms of the cabinet appointments, but the person who's kind of Boris Johnson's de facto chief of staff is someone by the name of Dominic Cummings. Dominic Cummings is the person who literally ran the Vote Leave campaign. He was the kind of crazy genius behind it. And the fact that he's been put in number 10 right beside the Prime Minister with the job to deliver Brexit by October 31 is extraordinary. And what's actually been quite reassuring is there was this concern that after the leadership contest, after they went to the members, that they'd start dragging back and saying, oh no, maybe Brexit will be delayed, maybe it won't happen. They've actually doubled down. Everyone is said consistently since he became Prime Minister, both Boris Johnson himself and his key ministers, that it will happen by October 31. There's obviously no guarantees in politics, but it gives me a lot more confidence that they're preparing for a no deal, that they're unwilling to speak to the EU until they are willing to drop the backstop. So it seems like something certainly is happening, and that the government is on for lack of a better term, war footing when it comes to ensuring that the UK does leave the EU. So I'm quite optimistic compared to where I was a few weeks ago.
Yeah, because that's interesting you say that, because Boris Johnson's never really been seen as the person that was completely over the moon about Brexit. I know he's had statements where he's supported it consistently, but he never seemed to be the poster child for the Brexit movement. So has he changed his mind, or is he just going, this is what the voters want?
I'm not sure that. So Boris Johnson was one of the key spokespeople for the Vote Leave campaign in 2016. He was one of the main presenters and probably the main face of Vote Leave. And there was a question about the fact that he was kind of dilly and dallying around the time of the referendum, whether or not he'd come out for Leave or come out for Remain. And he infamously wrote 2 articles for the Daily Telegraph, 1 article for Remain, 1 article for Leave. And that's been claimed that it's a sign of his duplicity, that he wasn't really for Brexit. Personally, I don't really buy that. If you read the article, because it's been leaked, the Remain side of it, the Remain article is pretty weak. You can tell that he's kind of, as a writer, as a journalist, he's kind of trying the intellectual case on both sides. And what you've got to remember is Boris was historically kind of made his name in politics as a Brussels correspondent for the Daily Telegraph, where he was heavily critical of the EU and the regulatory state. If anything, he caused some of the serious issues for Major when it came to the EU, and even Thatcher when it came to the EU, as a reporter. So I think he's actually got quite a consistent Euroscepticism underlying him. At the time of the referendum, he did dilly-dally a bit. Obviously, there was a lot of pressure from likes of David Cameron to support the EU, to support Remain. Ultimately, he did come out for Leave, and I think he's been relatively quite consistent since. He did quit cabinet when May announced her initial deal last July. He has always said that he wanted to leave. Maybe he's said his ideal solution isn't no deal, but he's willing to do all the preparations and be ready to go for it if he can't get a better deal out of the EU.
At the start of our conversation, you said that this is going down pretty badly with the British public and everyone's freaking out. But, like, is that actually what's going on? Are people really up in arms about it? Or are people quite optimistic about the Boris Johnson Prime Ministership?
I mean, at the start of the conversation, I was definitely being sarcastic. And I think the sense of some of the international concern about the UK is almost certainly exaggerated. If you look at just one of the key economic stats, one of the unemployment statistic here in the UK, it is at kind of 40-year lows. So the fact that businesses are still hiring, the economy is still going relatively well, shows that there is this kind of underlying confidence. In terms of reactions to Boris Johnson, there's obviously going to be a set of Remainers who have this, what's been called by Toby Young, the Boris derangement syndrome, where he literally is this evil figure. He's, kind of a fascistic kind of figure, which is just absolutely ridiculous based on the facts. Those people are obviously going to reject him, but they're always going to reject him. I think that amongst people who support Leave and who support Brexit, there is a renewed optimism about Boris Johnson. And we've seen that there was a substantial uptick in the first polls that came out post Boris's leadership. The Tories are now number 1 in all the polls. Now, they're not doing extremely well because they still haven't delivered Brexit, but the real challenge to the Tories is to win back that kind of 15-20% that's with the Brexit party. And if they can win that back, they'll be well over 40%. They'll be able to very much thrash Labor at an election.
Yeah, I found those polls that showed that the Brexit party was actually leading in some constituents absolutely amazing when they were coming out. So has the Boris Johnson thing, has that killed off Brexit party as like a major political force now? Is there a chance that they might be a part of like a coalition?
I mean, it's hard to say. It's especially hard to say when you've got a first past the post system here in the UK, that they might still have the ability to win some seats. So it really will depend on when the election is. If Boris has delivered Brexit, it's hard to see the Brexit party having much success as an entity, and the Conservative Party will be able to win back a lot of that vote. If they went to the polls 2 weeks ago, before Boris was Prime Minister, and without delivering Brexit, the Brexit party would have won potentially hundreds of seats. So it's really going to be context dependent. What can't happen for the Conservatives, though, was the result in the EU elections, where they got literally less than 10% of the national vote. I mean, that kind of result is basically the end for the Conservative Party. So that they've almost certainly got to be able to deliver Brexit and get out and then refocus the kind of campaign against Jeremy Corbyn and Labor. And it's worth noting that after that, the Labor and the left is going to be more divided as well, between the Lib Dems, who had a resurgence as the Remain party, and Labor, who's like a semi-Remain party, but is not as strong on it as Lib Dems are. So I think if they can do a Brexit, they're actually in quite a good electoral position.
That's awesome. So with Boris Johnson coming in, Theresa May goes out, and there's been a few articles written about like what's her legacy, and it's pretty grim reading for any people that might still be fans of Theresa May. I was going to ask you, like, how do we think about Theresa May like 20 years from now? What do history books say about it?
I mean, I think she's genuinely one of the worst, if not the worst, post-war Prime Minister. She came in with one job, and that job was to deliver Brexit, and she was unable to do that.
Yeah, when you put it like that.
And then you add on top of that the fact that she had this supposed domestic agenda that didn't really work that well. She took the Tories from a majority to a minority in an election, and then she took the Tories to the lowest result basically in a few hundred years at the EU election. I don't think history will be particularly kind on Theresa May, but it also depends how successful Boris Johnson is. I mean, if Boris Johnson achieves Brexit, wins a majority, it'll make May look substantially worse. If he can't, May looks a little bit better by comparison. But even so, I think what's been going on outside of Brexit is very much a return to a kind of pre-Thatcher Conservative Party, very kind of paternalistic Conservative Party, one that's willing to adopt a lot of market interventions and price controls and all these kind of policies that, first of all, kind of hurt the Conservative Party electorally because they couldn't really beat Jeremy Corbyn by being Jeremy Corbyn light, but also in itself are a bunch of terrible policies. And so the other reason why I'm actually quite optimistic about Boris Johnson, because he's probably appointed the most free market cabinet since Thatcher, even perhaps more free market than some of Thatcher's cabinets, which is quite extraordinary. You've got really great people like Liz Truss and James Cleverly and Dominic Raab, even potentially Sajid Javid as Chancellor. You've got these people who have an idea about free markets, have an idea about needing to encourage entrepreneurs and encourage trade, and that leading to prosperity, which didn't exist under May's regime.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because, like, Boris Johnson, everyone says like Brexit is his main thing, and like, what are the other options? What are the other challenges that Boris Johnson's going to face? And yeah, you've hit the nail on the head with the free market stuff. There's also like the paternalism in Britain. Is Boris Johnson traditionally that kind of guy? Like, from some of the stuff we see about his personal life, I don't think he'd be too into paternalism. But what do you reckon he's going to have on that front?
Look, I don't think Boris Johnson's like a perfect free marketeer, libertarian, classical liberal in every way I might like. What I would say is often his instincts are quite good. So during the leadership campaign, for example, he said the sugar tax needed to be reviewed and all these nanny state interventions are going too far, which was quite a good sign. He's talked a lot more about encouraging entrepreneurs, encouraging business, encouraging the wealth creators. That was certainly never the rhetoric we saw from Theresa May, who was very much a kind of wishy-washy, we need some state intervention and a little bit of market. So there's great optimism there for Boris Johnson. Another area, for example, he's talked about in recent days reforming is planning laws. It's just this huge issue when it comes to housing, and the cost of housing, particularly in London, is just making it totally unaffordable, particularly for young people to buy homes. And they need substantial planning reform to allow people to build more homes. And he's talking about that. And when it comes to free trade, he's appointed a great trade minister, and he's been talking about kind of seeking agreements with countries like Australia and New Zealand and Canada, but also obviously the US as well. So I think on the beyond Brexit front, there's a lot of reason to be optimistic on the free market side of things. The challenge, though, is the fact that he doesn't really have a particularly strong majority whatsoever. And even with the DUP, he's got like a 1 or 2 seat majority, and there's going to be a by-election where Tories could lose another seat this coming weekend. So as a result of that, he needs to get through Brexit in the next 100 days, and then really, if he wants to do anything on the domestic front, he probably needs to go to an election in order to win a majority, in order to actually be able to push through a broader agenda, because I think it's quite difficult to govern on the current dynamic in Parliament.
All right, sweet. I'm going to ask you to put on, look into a crystal ball for a second. So true or false, Britain leaves the EU on October 31st?
Ooh, I'm going to say true, but I feel like every other political prediction I've made in recent years has been wrong. So with a grain of salt.
All right, can we get you to say false then, just so hopefully we'll reverse jinx this one?
Yeah, okay. So if you could publish 2 versions of the podcast, false, there will be no Brexit.
Yeah, okay, and then we run them in the Telegraph, and 5 years later, you're British Prime Minister. But anyway, the other true or false one, I've got is true or false. There is a no deal Brexit in the end of it.
I think false. I think more likely not than so.
Like a watered down deal or a pretty hard line deal? Like, are they staying in the customs market? Are they doing all these things?
So they definitely can't stay in the customs union single market. That's something that's been ruled out. I think they're basically playing, to an extent, a kind of madman game with the EU. So one of the big flaws with Theresa May was the fact that there was never any sense that she would actually go for a no deal, and it was never really put on the table. And that meant that if you can't walk away from a negotiation, the other side can get a lot more out of you. The fact that Boris is doing all this preparation for a no deal is showing that he's serious about no deal will make the Europeans a lot more willing to compromise. And that's why I think that they will get some kind of watered down deal without the backstop hopefully, or some kind of different kind of arrangement when it comes to the Northern Ireland issue and when it comes to the border. So I think that they want a deal deep down, but in order to get the deal that is reasonable, they need to have the preparation to walk away without one.
When I was watching Boris Johnson's first question time as Prime Minister, like, I just always forget how much better question time is in Britain than in Australia. Like, it's an absolute scene. Everyone's talking the whole time. Everyone's got the best insults. Like, what are the differences between UK and Australian politics? Why is it always so much better theatre over there?
I suspect because the chamber in the UK is much smaller. In fact, there's an inability for everyone to sit down. There's 650 MPs over here, and they don't have a set seat. And that means that it's quite crowded, everyone's quite close to each other, and then the style of kind of debate in Parliament tends to be a lot more, I guess, a lot smarter and a lot more confrontational, rather than the Australian Parliament where everyone's kind of a bit more spread out. And there's kind of the theatrics are very much, in both cases, I guess they're conjectured, but in the Australian case, it just feels like it's a little bit more try hard. There's another difference as well with question time in Australia, which is that in Australia, the question time is every day and you can ask any minister a question. While in the UK, usually the kind of question time is with Prime Minister's question time is once a week, and you just ask the questions of the Prime Minister. So it means that you're just always bouncing off one person rather than going between different ministers, which happens in Australia.
Right. Any other major differences you've noticed between Australian and British politics?
There's a lot less party discipline. Especially at the moment, but even more broadly, because there's just so many more MPs. It's just much harder for any sense of control. I think one of the key issues in Australia is that basically half of the party room is on the front bench, and then the other half wants to be on the front bench.
And might be 5 seconds away from being on the front bench.
Well, exactly. So there's never that sense of willingness as much to criticise the government and its actions. Whilst in the UK, you've got these kind of people who are effectively permanent backbenchers. And they know that, and that means that they don't feel the need to follow and do what the government says at every stage.
All right, sweet as. Matthew, thanks so much for coming on the show. Where can people follow you on Twitter? Maybe you want to plug your book again?
Sure. If everyone wants to know what's happening in Australia, you can read my book, Democracy in a Divided Australia. Probably looking back on the recent election is now even more relevant in terms of the new divide in Australia between the inner city and suburbia.
All right, brilliant. All right, Matthew, thanks so much for coming on the show. Thank
you for having me. Have a good day.
Okay, that was our interview with Matthew Lesh. Really good. So that was a really awesome interview. I love talking to Matthew about it. I got a lot of questions that I had solved, but unfortunately for Matthew, you might remember like halfway through that interview, he said how they're absolutely going to leave the customs union single market. But unfortunately for Matthew, front page of the Telegraph this morning, Boris Johnson says the UK could stay in EU customs union and single market for 2 years after Brexit deadline. So a few things need to be solved. Hopefully Matthew's other predictions are coming true, because he was pretty damn optimistic about it all. So we'll see with that.
It was nice.
Yes. Now we'll go to an interview with Shawn. So I should probably set this up. So Shawn, as I said at the start of the show, native Hong Konger. He's in Australia at the moment. Now, he's going to be in studio with me. Unfortunately, because of the situation in Hong Kong and because of the situation with the extradition bill, we're not going to be filming that, and we're not going to put his full name out there, so he keeps a bit of anonymity. But he really wants to tell his story. He really wants to tell what the situation is in Hong Kong and what's going down there. And I'm sure there's so many people out there that want to know, because what started as we saw those time-lapse pictures of millions of people walking through the streets and all the stuff that's happening, and it's now getting pretty violent, and there's triad link gangs on the run in Hong Kong. It's getting pretty bad. So I definitely think we should talk to Shawn about that. So yeah, we'll now go to that one now. Okay, we're now welcome onto the show Shawn. Now, Shawn is a native Hong Konger, and you're in Australia at the moment, and we were talking off air about some of the experiences that you've had, and I just know that there's going to be a lot of listeners to this podcast, a lot of watchers on YouTube. Now, we're not filming this, obviously, but people do watch this on YouTube who do want to know a whole lot about what's going on in Hong Kong. So I guess we'll start there. So it was so inspirational when they started happening. I mean, the videos of people marching through the streets, everyone loved watching that. So where are we at now? What's the situation?
Right now, it's quite tense politically. what we see is that the protest is kind of morphing, self-perpetuating in a sense. So originally we started off being anti-extradition bill. Now it's kind of anti-police, anti-government. So you want to conceptualize the protest kind of like 2014, the Umbrella Movement, named after the tool that a lot of the students used to defend themselves against the tear gas. But it's also the Umbrella Movement because a lot of different causes and constituencies kind of use the protest as a moment to kind of vent their grievances against the establishment. So we're looking at Umbrella Movement 2.0, only just much more intense because the same people who went through Umbrella Movement are going through a much higher stake protest right now. And originally it was very peaceful, as you said. We had 2 million people on June 16th, I think, marching in the road. 2 million, really peaceful. As a normal Hong Kong citizen, the Hong Kong police crackdown kind of disproportionately heavy, and that kind of just stoked the anger of a lot of the common citizens who kind of maybe apolitical, who kind of just stood by the sidelines, and a lot of people just thought that this might be huge. This is the government using its state forces to kind of just clamp down on freedom of speech. My rights are being infringed, and that's where we are really kind of nervous, anxious about what's going on. And now that Beijing recently kind of just for the first time broke with tradition and voiced its stance on the issue, we are afraid about the People's Liberation Army kind of just stepping in and clamping down the protest.
Oh, I'll get to that in a bit, but you talk about how there's an umbrella movement that cares, there's a lot of different people that are caring about a lot of different things. But if you had to sum up what's uniting everyone, what would it be?
Democracy.
Democracy?
Freedom to elect your government official.
Right.
So Hong Kong is kind of run like a company. I think that's what the central government really sees us as. We are kind of the outlet, the funnel for a lot of capital, financial capital, especially with the China-US trade war that's going on. Hong Kong is treated like a Western country. We don't have the tariffs that China and the mainland have to endure when doing business with the US. So as the trade war kind of rages on, businesses in the mainland kind of just moved southward to Hong Kong, and that's what they see us as, is like an adapter to the outside world. And now that we kind of went really political on the other side, it's they're not really too happy about that. Our president, like quote unquote president, Carrie Lam is we call it the chief executive. So it kind of puts into perspective how the central government really sees the special administration of Hong Kong.
Yeah. So Hong Kong's always been like an interesting political thing. It was for a long time with the British, and then it was sort of handed over to China. But It's been in a sort of, it's still kept independent. Now, when you say that you're worried about the People's Liberation Army, what is the relationship between China and Hong Kong right now?
It is, and I'm not really over-exaggerating this, but it is the worst since the 1960s Mao Cultural Revolution movement. It is that bad.
As in animosity or wanting to control? How was it?
Political tension-wise. Right. It's very heightened, it's very tense, nerve-wracking, because... so just going to give you a little bit of timeline what really happened.
Yeah, go ahead.
So a few days ago, what the government the local government in Hong Kong has been downplaying the size of the protest. We put 1 million in the streets. They say it's only 240,000. So the central government, they see the official figures. They think, okay, it's not bad. It's 8 million people in the city. That's a fraction. Nobody really cares. So let's push the bill. Let's push the bill as quickly as possible. Nobody's going to know about it. But then we stepped it up with 2 million people. And then now, you can't really downplay 2 million people, especially with
outside your window.
That's not in the thousands. And then especially with Hong Kong being such a small territory, if you clog the roads, everybody would notice. So the central government kind of got wind of that, and it's like, okay, you might want to do something about this. You guys are the business district is basically paralyzed, and you guys have a job to do to ensure the prosperity and economic stability of society for us and the country, and all that jargon, mantra, or whatever. But after 2 minutes, Chief Executive Carrie Lam kind of be, oh, okay, well, I'm sorry, I kind of misjudged the situation, but I'm doing it as from a standpoint of like a maternal figure. This, you might not want this now, but in the long term, it'll be great for us, which is complete utter nonsense, rubbish. It's kind of condescending that she would kind of go on air and kind of just say that.
You can say that about eating spinach, but not about your political independence. Like,
not only that, so the extradition bill, the reason why extradition bill is so frightening was that the original case had nothing to do with China at all. What
was the original case? I don't think people know that.
Yeah, I'm gonna talk about it. So it all started when there was a murder of a Hong Kong resident. So he kind of fled to Taiwan, I think.
Like the murderer fled.
Yeah. So the entire thing was to how do we extradite somebody from Taiwan to Hong Kong so that they can that suspect could be charged in Hong Kong being a part of China in this case. And the government kind of saw this as an opportunity to kind of like plug quote unquote loopholes in the law. It's like, oh right, how do we extradite criminals from other regions of China? Bear in mind, the assumption here is Taiwan is part of the Greater China, just like in a different system. So there's a lot of assumptions within this bill pass. That's why it wasn't so publicized in the beginning. They wanted to rush through it so that nobody could really get caught up with the details of the situation. So it was a murder in Taiwan of a Hong Kong resident, and the suspect is abroad. They want to get him to Hong Kong, but they don't have the laws to do so, which is rubbish because some legal experts actually showed that you can do it with the existing laws that we have. They just want it to, they see it as a political opportunity to really just plug what they want.
Yeah. So when you say stuff like that, like the chief executive doing this sort of stuff, I don't know the situation as well as obviously you and as much as some people, but it does sound like they're probably closer to China than they are to their own constituents. Is that something that people feel?
Yes, definitely, because, we never elect our chief executive. We don't even know who our next chief executive is, to be honest. The chief executive has always been elected and probably will always be elected by a panel of tycoons, rich, business, politically connected elites in China and in Hong Kong, and also the central government officials. We have no say on who gets to run our city. So there's a lack of accountability. The accountability is to their board panel. So to go back to the metaphor of the company, so you are accountable to your board members. We are more like products.
Right.
We funnel we keep China tethered to the outside world financially, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right now, yeah.
Sorry, like you reckon the chief executive is probably more closely working with Chinese officials than standing up for Hong Kongers.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's terrifying. So last week, like there were these videos that were coming out of triad-link gangs attacking commuters and residents. Like I just saw videos of people all in white shirts walking onto trains and beating people up. People weren't even protesting.
Yes.
Do we know why they were there and like who they're with?
We do, but officially we don't.
Right.
So, officially they were like, oh, probably, these are just some random people who just got together and tried to vent their frustrations. But these people were never charged, you see. But like the protesters, they're all charged.
Yeah, but also like they're all wearing the same shirt. Like at that point, someone's like,
it was organized, definitely organized.
It was organized, and also that they wanted protesters to know that they were being organized. Like otherwise, you'd be making them wear different things.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the context of that incident was the protesters who were coming home. They came home after going to the central government office in Hong Kong, so we call it the Chinese Liaison Office in Hong Kong, where the Beijing central government send their officials to kind of just monitor what's going on, if everything's stable, and are we heading in the right direction and stuff like that. So what happened was somebody smeared paint on the on the emblem in front of the liaison office. With they were wearing masks. They were not identified, obviously. But it might sound esoteric, but smearing paint on the Chinese emblem is something that would get you locked away for very, very long in mainland China, because it was seen as a direct challenge to the authoritarian communist rule.
Yeah, I've heard in Hong Kong it's even illegal to sing the Chinese national anthem in a condescending manner.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. So obviously, China, the Communist Party cares a lot about it being respected among the people, and there's no end to how far it would go just to safeguard that. In fact, like, just a little bit of coincidental symbolic trivia. The butcher of Beijing, Li Peng, he was the person who ordered the crackdown on Tiananmen Square in 1989. He passed away on July 22nd, on the same day that those protests were going on. Beijing ordered the local government to fly the national flag and the city's flag half-mast. We don't do that because we commemorate June 4th, 1989. We know what he did, but it was a symbolic provocation of, we know you know history, and we know that you fear history, and you are and then what you're doing is repeating history. So it's like a symbolic provocation of that. And to add on, the same day, everything was an intimidation factor, with the possibility that police forces might have been colluding with these organizers or gang members and it really shatters the fiction that the police is on our side anymore. Anything state related is on our side anymore. And it kind of feels very alienating and isolating in a sense.
Yeah, that's absolutely terrifying.
Yeah.
Look, in Melbourne, right, a month or two ago, a bunch of vegan protesters, like 30 people, closed down one street, and it was like national conversation for 3 days. Explain what it's like to live in Hong Kong with this level of protest, this level of tension, this level of like police action.
Right.
Like, what is that like, if you can put it into words?
Okay, so the way to conceptualize it was to know how it was before. Before it was perfect. Like, it was bar none the safest city I've ever been. It's a 24-hour city. I could wake up at 3-4 in the morning, kind of go to the business district alone, or probably meet up with a friend just to grab something to eat. I did not fear for my safety at all. So
I don't think anyone would mess with you anyway. You're an intimidating man.
Thank you.
Please put that baseball bat down.
Thank you. But it was that type of city. So now with the protest and the way that police kind of started harassing citizens, it kind of just shattered that illusion really, really quickly. So we tried to do it as civil and peaceful as possible. We played by the books. We conducted civil disobedience by strong-arming business district roads, just clogging them up so that people will listen. Bear in mind that our leaders are not accountable to us. They're accountable to the central government. And the central government cares about Hong Kong as more or less as a company. So if we kind of clog the business district, they have to at least listen. So that was the mindset that we were doing, that we were thinking. So clogging that up, we kind of tried to do it, and then we got cracked down by the police. They had batons with nuts and bolts.
Yeah, wow.
Just swinging away at students with. That's why if you look at the photos of the protests, a lot of people are wearing hard hats and masks. They're still out there. They're still. It is a personal right issue, and clogging up. I've been around Melbourne. The roads are quite big. Clogging up the national roads. I feel like if you did that, the amount of people, the amount of protesters in Melbourne clogged up a road, China would not hesitate on like just deploying, the necessary force to kind of just sweep you away. We had 1 million people.
Oh, 1989 is pretty good evidence of that. Yeah.
Yeah. And the fact that they could turn really quickly on the narratives. Before 1989, they were just championing students are our future. And then before this, they were talking about how Hong Kong is necessary and integral to the prosperity and economic growth of China. So you should always bear in mind that they can turn really quickly if they feel, if the Communist Party's legitimacy is threatened.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So final question, are you optimistic at all for the future of Hong Kong? And if so, why? And if not, why not?
As of now, no, not really. Yeah, it's the way that the protest is heading, both sides are really dug in. So in mainland China, this news has been largely censored. So they, as I mentioned earlier, they kind of broke away from tradition, and started covering the story a lot more. They're saying that unpatriotic protesters are destabilizing the society for their own selfish reasons, and that's how they kind of force the narrative. And now that it's out there, they need to see to it that this protest ends one way or the other. Otherwise, they will look bad.
Righto. All right. Shawn, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Great to be here.
Okay, cool. That was our interview with Shawn. Awesome story. It's such an incredible thing that's going on and happening in real time. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't think anyone knows what's going to happen. So anyway, well, let's try and lighten the mood with a few stories that made us laugh from this week. And I want to start off with this, if I may, Adam. Quentin Tarantino, new movie coming out, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It looks awesome. The reviews are really good. But unfortunately, we're going to have to cancel him.
We are.
Yeah. Quentin, this cancel culture, and they're now coming after Tarantino. I thought it was only a matter of time. But anyway, in The Guardian, this article from Roy Chacko, why it's time to cancel Quentin Tarantino. He's talking about all the violence that gets performed in his films, especially on women, and we can't, in the modern society, have that with all of the stuff, so therefore no more Quentin Tarantino movies for anyone. I want to read out, word for word, the best paragraph in the history of English literature.
Let's go.
In Tarantino's debut directorial film, Reservoir Dogs, the only female characters in the credits are shot women and shocked women. Pulp Fiction, his second film, features female characters more prominently, but a trend of reveling in the abuse of women began to emerge. One of Pulp Fiction's most famous scenes involved Uma Thurman's character getting stabbed in the heart with a shot of adrenaline to resuscitate her after a drug overdose. A few things to unpack here. First off, by his logic in Reservoir Dogs, he just wants more women being... first off, has he seen any Quentin Tarantino film?
No, not at all. There's a lot of violence.
Yeah, if you're worried about the violence against women, don't see what happens to the men. It's a lot worse.
He's gonna cry.
And the idea that because Reservoir Dogs, violence is performed on literally everyone, and the idea of we need to have more women in this film. He's basically calling for more women to be heard in the film Reservoir Dogs. If he needs more people than shot women and shocked women, I think is that what he's calling for?
Yeah, I think so.
And then third part, to single out how Uma Thurman's character is treated in Pulp Fiction when she's being stabbed in the heart with an adrenaline needle. It's to save her life.
Apparently, we can't save any more women's lives.
Yeah, it's so if you haven't seen Pulp Fiction, first off, what are you doing? And second off, so he stabs her, she's overdosing, so he stabs her with an adrenaline needle and she comes back to life. So apparently, if he's being respectful and he's being peaceful with women, he should have just let her OD.
Got to let him die.
Got to let her OD. You don't want to be... By his logic, is every surgeon just this depraved lunatic that just goes into people's bodies and performing all acts of terrible things
medicine is
taking
a dark
out
world.
tumors and stuff like that. What an absolute sick freak. So for me, it sucks that we have to cancel Quentin Tarantino. I love his films, but
violence.
Until you have more women being performed violence on in Quentin Tarantino films,
Less women being saved.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Adam, you saw, you're a musician. You saw something pretty big happen in the music world.
This is kind of on the more interesting side. A$AP Rocky has been charged and imprisoned in Sweden.
Yep.
Where he's been there for a little while now. And
the A$AP Rocky, American rapper.
Maybe
not everyone
American
knows who
rapper.
he is. He's a big boy.
He's very big,
Yeah.
and his music's awesome.
Yes.
I'd check it out. Anyway, Trump has offered to personally vouch for A$AP Rocky's bail. And a lot of people are really upset about this.
Yeah.
And I think you must really hate Trump
Yeah.
if you want A$AP Rocky to stay in jail.
Yeah, it's you know what? To beat Trump, to own Trump, we're going to let A$AP Rocky rot in a Swedish prison.
He's just got to
Sorry, man. This
got
is
a
the
rot
way
there.
it's got to be. This is the way it's got to be.
Sorry, ASAP.
Yeah, bad news for you. What I like the idea is like, because Trump, I'm going to guess that Trump did not know who ASAP Rocky was before he got involved in a Swedish prison. Do you reckon someone had to like actually sit down and explain to Trump like, oh, his name's ASAP with the $sign, not ASAP with the S, and like, well, this is the ASAP mob. This is what they're about. And
I reckon Trump actually. I mean, he had a kind of a relationship with Kanye.
Yep.
He's vouching for ASAP Rocky.
Yep.
Maybe he's a secret, big rap fan.
Reckon?
Yeah,
All
I
right,
reckon.
we got to get a hold of his metadata, see what he's doing.
Yeah, let's get on that.
If he's like some odd future fanatic, just can't get enough of Tyler the Creator. That would be huge. All right, I've got another one here. So I've got bad news. Apparently, the outrage mob on the internet has become all powerful. So Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is, obviously the biggest celebrity on the planet, I would say. And he decided to weigh in on the new British Prime Minister. So he tweeted out, breaking, PM Boris Johnson is in fact my cousin, because they got the same surname, so it's a joke. Though we clearly look more like twins. Jokes aside, PM did say something in his speech I liked, quote, "The people are our bosses." 100% agree. The people /audience/consumer will always matter. Moss, #our boss. Pretty good tweet.
Yeah.
Unfortunately not, because he then deleted the tweet after everyone started tweeting at him that Boris Johnson's the worst person in the world. So he then tweeted out, well, according to the people, maybe we're not related after all. Big mahalo to my people who I can always rely on to give me the real talk and swift perspective and education on the individual I did not know. Tequila on me, Britain. So The Rock, the most powerful man in the world, the biggest celebrity in the world.
Big man.
Yep. Is now not as powerful as the outrage mob. There is no hope for us on the internet, is my theory.
What I think's funny about it is the tweet was, people are the boss.
Yeah.
He took that tweet down in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
He did exactly what the people wanted him to do straight away.
Yeah, exactly.
So there was nothing, he did not lie in the tweet.
Yeah, well, that's true. The people are our boss. And if the people make The Rock feel nervous about the
he'll do anything
release
you
of
want.
Hobbs and Shaw, he will delete it very quickly. See, this really hurts me because I don't know if you've ever had this one, but have you ever had the one like, if the aliens landed tomorrow, who would you send to talk to them? Now, my answer's always been The Rock, because he's incredibly charming, and then second of all, if
You
they
wouldn't hurt him.
They wouldn't hurt him. And then second of all, he's also gigantic, and they're like, what if everyone looks like that on planet Earth? Let's not mess
It's a
with
good
these people.
representation.
But if he can't stand up for 15 minutes to the outrage mob, I'm going to have to find a new diplomat, because
I
he
agree.
doesn't sound like he's going to be someone that's going to push for Earth's survival that hard.
I agree. He'll give in to whatever they want.
Yeah.
He'll
All right.
sell us to the aliens.
All right, so good luck to us all out there. All right, so the final story we have, you saw this one. So Will Fowles was a Labor MP, a Labor state MP in Victoria that got himself into a bit of trouble in Canberra.
Yeah, he was in his hotel room and he smashed down his door. But he didn't, it's not one of those swift kicks like in the movies where the police kick it down. He has taken off half the door.
Yeah. So they were holding luggage for him, and he wanted it because he's late for a 9 a.m. flight.
He had a 9 a.m. flight,
And
which
so-
is very early.
Yeah, it's an early flight. No one loves a 9 a.m. flight, but definitely I've never had a 9 a.m. flight where I felt the need to kick a door no less than 10 times. Like, he broke a sweat.
He's been spending a fair bit of time, probably longer than it would take to get someone with a key to unlock the door.
Like, if you were sort of late for the flight before you started kicking, you're definitely late now.
He's late now.
You are
And
late now.
He's probably injured his foot. He's going to limp to the airport now.
Yeah. I also like the idea that, like, because his excuse was it was a 9 a.m. flight, and I like the idea that, like, the earlier the flight is, the more anger and
The more damage
advanced
you
weaponry you can use
you can
on a
cause.
hotel. Like, if you've got a 5 a.m. flight, you can come in with a bazooka and just
You
blow
can
the
burn the
crap out
house
of a
down.
door.
Yeah, you can do whatever you like.
Just make sure everyone's safe, but you can then burn the hotel to the ground
Yeah.
if it's a 5 a.m. flight. And that's just, that's just the rules that we can take out of this. All right, that is it for the show this week. Thanks again to Matthew, Lesh, and Shawn, and thank you to Adam.
Thanks for having
doing
me.
an incredible job sitting in for Pete. I don't need Pete anymore. He's been holding me back all these years, and I think
Sorry,
you and I are
Pete.
going to lift each other up to new and
go.
undiscovered heights. Now, Adam, you are you are a very good musician.
thank
The band is SoFox.
We
Good,
are.
I got
We're
that right.
SoFox.
And you were kind enough to let us play another song, because last
Yeah.
week we played one of his songs at the end of the show. People really loved it. So
Oh,
you
thanks,
happy for that
everyone.
to happen again?
Yeah, I'd
All
love
right.
to.
What track would you like?
This one's called Lover's Side. It's off our EP. Thanks for listening, everyone.
All right. Head to Spotify, check it out, and see you guys next week.
See you guys.
Run to your mother, I don't like to talk to you.